This is a Renegade Media Network podcast.
I got to tell you guys about Zippix nicotine toothpicks. They're flavored toothpicks with nicotine in each one. I want to tell you about them because you might have heard them advertised now on some other podcasts because their name is getting out there. Let me tell you this little fact. This was the first podcast that they ever advertised on, and that is because I actually reached out to them. I already used this product, and I thought I might as well advertise for them. That's how much I like them, and I still use them all the time. They're flavored toothpicks, like I said, with nicotine in each one. Check out the flavors. Peppermint, watermelon, excellent. They've got the old school cinnamon. Remember the cinnamon toothpicks you would have as a kid? This is basically the adult version. They've got sweet whiskey, sweet wood. They've got mocha, spice, island clove. Very, very good as well. So basically, if you're trying to kick a bad habit, maybe go for the cheapest alternative on the market. That would be Zippix toothpicks over at zippixtoothpicks.com. And of course, they want to support this show, and so do you. And if you want to buy some of these toothpicks, that helps this show out. So promo code BUCK at checkout, BUCK, gets you 20% off of your order. That is 20% off when you enter promo code BUCK, BUCK, at zippixtoothpicks.com. Let's get to the show.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Counterflow Podcast. You heard the man. This is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson. This is a very important episode, and that's because I bet you if I asked all of you listening right now, what was the biggest issue of 2020? Some of you might say COVID, but what you really mean is the lockdown. The lockdowns affected most of us, unless you're lucky enough to be in Florida. Though, Becky, some people out in Florida, unless you're there, for the most part, at some point in your life, the lockdowns affected you, as probably did the mask mandates at certain points. So, of course, the entire time of 2020, you had Dr. Fauci and the corporate press just pumping out fear, trying to explain why businesses should shut down, why you should have a mask on. And it might have taken longer than it should have, but a lot of us have now seen the light, and we see what a mess, what a web of lies that all turned out to be, much like the war in Iraq, the lead up to the war in Iraq, the WMD lies after 9/11. This was very similar, but it happened so much more quickly. And one of the sad parts is they didn't really even need to police it, did they? A lot of people within society wanted to be little arms of the government and to hall monitor everyone and report you if you're not wearing a mask, and how dare you open your salon and things like that. We witnessed a lot of this, a lot of disappointing elements of society reared their very, very ugly heads. And for months now, some of us have been saying there's got to be a group of people, professional filmmakers, that can document this, put it down on the record, and show exactly what happened, show the reality of what the red pill version of what really happened and what really should not have happened. And lo and behold, the Sound Mind Creative Group have come to the rescue. They are putting out a multi-part docuseries called Follow the Science on Lockdowns and Liberty. And these guys are true heroes, and I don't use that term lightly. Here's the deal, though. They work in Hollywood. They work in film and movies and TV in Hollywood. So, as you might imagine, their perspective, their points of view, not particularly popular amongst their peers. So they are here with me. There's 3 of these guys here, and they're using fake names because they have to. Otherwise, they will be blacklisted and not allowed any work any longer in Hollywood. And so if you're watching the YouTube version of this, I can't show their faces, guys. I'm sorry. And I apologize again because I can only show mine. So all you've got to see is me. Again, my apologies, but I can't out these people because the work they're doing is truly important. And we're going to link in the show notes. They're going to give you the links within this episode, exactly how to help them fundraise, their goals, what they need from you guys, from all of the listeners. So share this episode. It's extremely important. There's guys that are pros at this, and they're actually going to put out a very good documentary series on exactly what happened. I will waste your time no longer discussing it here. From the Sound Mind Creative Group, we will, for the purposes of this interview, call them Alan, Matt, and John. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks
for having us, Buck.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
This is cool. So we're going to get to the documentary that we want to have you guys put out. I believe it's going to be called Follow the Science on Lockdowns and Liberty. At least that's the last thing I had heard and I saw on your website. But let's kind of get to a brief introduction of who you are, why you had to kind of create the Sound Mind Creative Group, and we'll kind of go from there. So I guess I'll direct this maybe. Alan, you can go first.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so the concept behind Sound Mind Creative Group was that we all have been working in Southern California in the Hollywood scene for many decades, many decades across all the members, and we were pre-pandemic, pre-lockdown, all these things, pre-cancel culture. We were already used to having to navigate what we kind of would call the groupthink of Southern California, and just having any sort of independent way of thinking, let alone standard libertarian thoughts, conservative thoughts, Republican thoughts, just old school traditional liberal thoughts. If you were outside the norm of the sort of whatever the latest flavor of the groupthink of Hollywood was all about, you would find yourself on the outs. You would find yourself not getting the phone calls. I always like to talk about how all the cliches are true in Hollywood, and it is about who you know, and it is all about networking, and it's about working that network to get the next gig. And you would notice that the phone would ring a great deal less if you were open about the way you thought. So being someone who wanted to be, we knew that, we know that, and as filmmakers who have collaborated in both the Hollywood mainstream as well as the niche market of the liberty movement, we knew that we had to. We want to make films. We want to make. We want to take on controversial subjects, but we wanted to create a group that emphasized the privacy of its members, so that we could work a bit more freely in expressing ourselves and creating a film that takes on specifically, for instance, the pandemic, without necessarily worrying about the current phenomena of cancel culture. And obviously the three of us are out there speaking, and there's sort of a circle of trust within the people that we're working with, but we wanted to have something that we could also recruit with in terms of getting crew, top Hollywood type talent who might want to work on this stuff, but also want to have several layers of protection. So we see it as a multifaceted, anonymous, a relatively anonymous group that allows us to make cutting edge controversial films.
This is so wild, just hearing you say these things. And obviously, I think everyone listening understands that that's kind of the way it goes these days. But it's so strange. I'm not even a movie guy. I told you guys before we started, my brother is wrapped up in that movie world. And he sends me these pictures and I have to go, who is that? And it's like, hey, it's this famous person. But the fact that a creative industry, an artistic industry, within that, you have to create a kind of private, an anonymous group, basically, just to be, I wouldn't even call it edgy, just to be a little bit outside of the homogenous thought that Hollywood is immersed in. That's crazy. Matt, can you talk about, I obviously, to kind of keep your privacy here, can you kind of talk about maybe collectively some of the projects that the three of you got, that maybe some of my audience would know that you guys have kind of been a part of? I understand you didn't all work on everything together, but just to keep your privacy respected, name some of those projects.
Yeah, so I mean, we've worked on a number of projects in a number of roles. So we can kind of broadly tell you a little bit about that. I mean, basically, I mean, we've done work for whether it's Disney, NBC, most of the major networks in various ways, different roles. We've among the members have include photojournalist, director, producer, composers, music supervisors. Editing, kind of all most of the roles, and again we're growing as we build this, and so we have some connections that we've built over the years, that we, especially prior. I mean, now it's more, we don't really. I personally don't even really bring up my politics at all. There used to be a time where I'd kind of ease into it, depending, and then we'd uncover. It's like, oh, you do kind of think like me too, and then so there's already a pre-existing community that we already are kind of aware of. Although this, coming out like this has also brought in new people too. We've been getting emails from people that wanna help out as well. That various creative types. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the major networks, all kinds of different roles in that sense. Various movies, feature films, feature documentaries. I think actually John might be able to go into that in a little more detail. Depending what detail we want to go to. But John, if you wanted to mention.
Sure, I can mention a few projects that people might know that amongst us we've worked on. Crazy Rich Asians is one. Gone Girl, the Fast and Furious franchise, Pursuit of Happiness, Dateline NBC, The Today Show, Magnum PI, Access Hollywood. That's just kind of scratching the surface of some projects that we've been involved with.
Okay, you named a couple things in there that I'm slightly familiar with, and there's been times where I turn on something like The Today Show, and in fact, my brother he basically is a PR guy, we can say, and he's had stars that he has to accompany or whatever, and he'll say, "Hey, turn on this show, and I'll be on here, and you can see me, whatever." It's painful to watch some of these, I guess, mainstream shows that I kind of shield myself from most of the time, and then I'll turn something on like the Today Show, and it's just nauseating. Do you guys get involved in some of these projects and some of the people maybe that you're surrounded by? It just makes you shake your head, John?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of really good people working in the entertainment industry, despite the prevalence of their politics. But there are divas, and there are difficult people to work with, and there are times where you kind of have to hold your nose a bit and do your job. Unfortunately, I think that's the reality in many industries when you're dealing with people that are at the very top whose heads may have gotten a little bigger than they deserve, but probably even more so in the entertainment industry, because it certainly draws people who like to have big egos and have those egos stroked.
I was reading up on the Sound Mind Creative Group, and it was almost perfect that you guys are on this show, Counterflow, because you haven't even seen my bio that I know of. I know it's in my email, but it says here for you guys, you want member artists of all kinds that can share perspectives and ideas that may at times run counter to the mainstream acceptable narrative, which is almost word for word in my bio. And I'm not obviously accusing you guys of stealing. I'm just saying how perfect this is fitting. And the tagline is for my show is dissident thoughts and unapproved opinions. And it sounds like basically that's what the Sound Mind Creative Group is kind of, maybe that kind of thought can flourish within that. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, that's definitely the idea. I mean, we've always had, I think part of it that formed this. I mean, obviously we could talk a little bit about the birth of the idea of doing this documentary, which has evolved into a docuseries, which we can talk about as well. But I think we've always, for years, been in this scene, and we've had our different ideas, and we've had our different opinions in that, and have had to be kind of quiet. But also, we're creative types, and we want to voice our opinions and voice ideas that are counter the mainstream. And I mean, there used to be a time, I mean, you look back at documentaries made in the 70s and that kind of thing. I mean, that was applauded. That was, considered great filmmaking. Now it's disturbing that it's shifted. But so we've always had this sense, and then it's like, well, think about it. It's like, oh, we should do this or make this documentary, and then it's like, oh, yeah, but then I got these couple big clients, and it's livelihood, and it's this, and the phone will stop ringing. It's like, and just kind of trying to figure that out. So, I mean, so this is really good, and there's a lot of people kind of with one foot still in that Hollywood scene. And we always think, I mean, it'd be nice to get independent of that, and some successfully do that, some just go the other way. But then there's a little problem with that too, because we want as many people to see this film as possible, and we don't, if you go all the way, then there could be a sense of it being painted with sort of like, oh, that's like right-wing conspiracy theory crazy stuff, so don't even look at it, and then we can't even get it to be seen. So it's this tricky balance that we got to try to do. So that's kind of part of that.
Yeah, I can only imagine the comments. Yeah, well, I know them quite well. But so let's get to this specific project. Really, whoever out of the three of you wants to pitch kind of to my listeners what this is, this documentary relating to COVID and the lockdowns and whatnot, kind of the elevator pitch of what it is, and then we'll kind of get into the weeds on it as well.
Sure, yeah, I'll go ahead. I mean, give the general objective of this. It's our plan is to develop a 5-episode docuseries, and what we'd like to do is examine if the scientific data justify the political strategies implemented during the pandemic. So we're gonna go through. We're gonna cover topics like the origins of the virus, the corruption of the scientific method, and ultimately really, present a sharp critique of centralized top-down policies that were used to enforce useless lockdowns, destroyed economies, and dismantled individual rights. So that's the general sense of it. We're going to cover a lot in it, and yeah, like I mentioned, it's going to be a 5-episode docu-series is what it has evolved in, because we initially we're just going to cover lockdowns and mask mandates, but we're gonna also go into vaccines, vaccine passports, vaccines versus treatment, and talk about all the things about various treatments, and also the origin of the virus, which is a developing story today as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I would say one of the big parts of it was we felt that it was pretty clear. I mean, our instincts were that the data and the actual story of the virus was going to be revealed to be very different than what was presented by the mainstream media, the main policymakers, and individuals such as Fauci. And sure enough, in this past week, everybody who had that feeling has seen that they were correct. So we feel that we're on the pulse, because this was the disconnect between the narrative presented versus what should have been a proper scientific method analyzing what happened, figuring out what's best to do. And I mean, and my quick take is that we should have, as a nation, as an economy, hyper focused on supporting the vulnerable and doing everything we could to help those who were in fact at threat of this disease, and not be locking down arbitrarily this sort of grand lockdown, deeming what industries were essential, non-essential. That was completely disconnected from the science, and that's showing to be every day in the news is showing to be more and more true.
Yeah, there's almost a silver lining here because of the decentralized methods, I think, of getting information out, as to maybe compared to just a couple of decades ago. Early on, I was comparing the propaganda and some of the overreaction of the COVID moment to the WMD lies following 9/11 and the lead up to the wars and whatnot. But that took a long time for people to kind of figure out. And unfortunately, it took a lot of dead bodies overseas and whatnot to figure out. It seems like this stuff's unraveling a little bit quicker this time. And we have voices like Tucker Carlson. I think it helps that he's the most viewed, news guy in America for sure. And he's been pretty damn good on this stuff. And because of decentralized methods of media like this show and a lot of this stuff, it just wasn't around in the early 2000s. Does it give you guys a sense of urgency, like we have to hurry up and get this thing out, because otherwise we don't want it in a year from now, everyone's going to go, yeah, now we already all know this stuff.
Yeah, well, we have a two-phased approach to this. We are planning on releasing basically what will be a pilot of one of the episodes in the fall, and that will probably be focused mostly on lockdowns and mask mandates. And part of our impetus to get something out then was a concern that there may be a resurgence in cases and a resurgence in these policies. In terms of the overall story, I mean, I think as these things are coming out and evolving, there is some concern that maybe it will be passé a year from now when we get the whole series done. But I think, as we've seen with any major news event, there may be things that come out, but they're going to get quickly pushed under the carpet, and they're not going to be thoroughly investigated. And we're seeing the long form project as being more, hopefully, an in-depth retrospective than it is kind of breaking news, because we think that the core issues are never going to get addressed in the mainstream media. And those issues for us are about the integrity of the scientific method, about the problems of centralization, and about people's willingness to blindly accept what authorities and, quote, experts are telling them. And those are the kinds of disruptions that we hope this project might implement in the general populace, is to cause people to think a little bit about those things and how quickly they accepted what they were told and responded to in the crisis.
I want to tell you guys about the official coffee of the Counterflow podcast, and that is Lorenzotti Coffee over at lorenzotti.coffee. I don't really want to specifically tell you about them because I drink it every morning, because I love it, because it's directly imported from Italy. It's in these vacuum sealed packs. It's in these beautiful tins that look very good on your kitchen counter. Those aren't really the reasons I want to tell you about them. The real reason is because in this day and age, with all of the insanity going on, I think it's nice to be able to have companies that are very like-minded that we can support. And that's very helpful. Everyone's scared now, like, should I support this company? I don't know. Are they crazy? Well, I can tell you, the guys at lorenzotti.coffee are really good guys. They're like-minded individuals, and they want to support shows like mine that you listen to. So I think if they're willing to give me a cut of the money coming into them from you guys, that should make you want to support them. You like this show, you want to support like-minded companies, well, here's one for you, Lorenzotti Coffee over at LORENZOTTI.coffee. I'll tell you one thing, if you type in promo code BUCK, B-U-C-K, at checkout, you will get 10% off of your order. You'll be supporting a very good company. The coffee is amazing, and it helps me out too. So if you like this show, give it some support. Now back to the show. How important is it as filmmakers or documentary makers, I suppose, in this case, to pull on people's emotional side, maybe to hit them in the feels, as young people like to say, because there is a tendency, and I'm guilty of this, to just go over facts and stats and charts and whatnot. And I do think those are effective mainly for people like me that think of, in, I don't know, more analytical terms or something and less artsy. But do you guys have a challenge to kind of mix in the factual aspects of all of this with a little bit of some pulling at the heartstrings of the public?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that. I mean, absolutely. It's all about story. And I say that definitively in the sense that, you look at I mean, Hollywood knows that if you tell a good story, you can change the way people think. And I've always thought it was at the detriment of all the other different ways of thinking. They're like, oh, well, we'll put the facts and figures out there, and then people will see the truth. But it's a very, actually, I think, a minority mind of sort of the rational, logical. Oh, you can see it, assess it. The critical thinking is on the wane. We're actually looking at the objective world is under attack, and it's almost like we're facing the subjective presentation these days that doesn't make sense to a lot of us, but the people who are presenting that know what they're doing. Why? We are oral storytelling creatures. I mean, the written word and the presentation of facts and figures is only a couple millennia old, really, and the modern printing press is only a few hundred years old. So we're this age of being able to read things dominated for a long time, but we've had tens of thousands of years as oral storytelling creatures. The way we absorb story is through the sort of the hero myth, the going on an emotional journey where you listen to a story, you go through the emotional thresholds with these people, and that subjective experience, that emotional experience, you can then, with each threshold, give a piece of knowledge. That knowledge, like what did they learn that got them from point A to point B on their subjective journey, and that's what wisdom is. I think wisdom, when you take knowledge and you take emotion and you put it together, take that empathetic journey, that's the wisdom that carries on through generations. I mean, it's a very common notion that like the World War II generation, they had a lot of wisdom. We're now 3 generations on from that wisdom has not been passed along thoroughly. I mean, the knowledge of what happened during the Cold War, what happened during World War II, is very limited. And we feel that you tell the important stories. I mean, in terms of the pandemic, there was so much that happened. I mean, severely disrupting and destroying the destructions of lives through the policies of lockdown. I mean, people who did not receive critical medical care, children who lost precious time developing skills and pursuing their dreams, children who were suffering mentally from being stuck at home all the time, parents who were mentally suffering from being stuck at home all the time, and addictions through the roof, child abuse is through the roof. We're going to be reeling for years in terms of the society-wide trauma that happened. And everyone has their own story. Everyone you've ever known and everywhere you've ever been also had to deal with this. Everyone's going to have a discrete story of their own that's going to be relatable to the stories that we want to bring to bear in this film, to impart that knowledge and figures and data that we think is so important for everyone to know. But you have to have that empathy for people to connect to it.
And are you guys, I believe I saw that you're kind of allowing people to contact y'all and relate their story and then possibly have it featured at some point in one of these, one of the 5 parts of this?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, we have a form set up on the soundmindcreativegroup.com website, so people can go there and there's a form on there and they can submit their stories. Anyone can email us too. We have soundmindcreativegroup at protonmail as well, protonmail.com. So, again, both with personal stories and also anyone interested in contributing, perhaps creatives that are interested in helping out. But yeah, people can submit their stories there, and we've been receiving a lot, and we're going through them. And yeah, we're obviously anyone that submits anything in there, none of it will be in the film. We'll contact anyone and certainly protect privacy of everyone that submits anything, and have proper releases and all that if we do feature any stories. So, but we're looking for stories that will pull on the heartstrings, because that definitely needs to be a part of this. And there are so many stories like that out there, and not a lot of them are being told, certainly not by the mainstream. So yeah, that's where people can submit stories there.
I want to follow up on that a little bit in that, there's this tendency to see pulling on the heartstrings as kind of being manipulation. And I think it's important to recognize that a lot of these stories aren't being told because of the paradigm of the mainstream narrative. A lot of these stories that should get out there are not getting out there. So in a way, it is to draw people in emotionally, but it's also to get on the record the terrible destruction that these policies have wreaked throughout our world, and make it plain that there are consequences to these actions.
That's excellent because it seems like only in our small little circles does anyone even consider unintended consequences.
Hmm.
And that's such a valuable aspect of looking at everything, every government policy and decision, and the media obviously just presents this look. People were going to get sick and die if you don't wear a mask and lock everyone down. So I'm thankful that there's guys like you putting something like this out just to maybe get in front of some new eyes, unintended consequences, and for people to think about that. I I did a speech recently in Oregon, and part of it was about, look, there's this group, this segment of the population that I would say is maybe center left, kind of the Kamala Harris, Hillary Clinton, Obama type lovers, the double maskers, the virtue signaling online. It, I was telling the Oregon Libertarian Party, look, don't bang your head on the wall trying to convince these people of our opinions. It's going to be like trying to convince a Mormon to become a Scientologist. You're just not going to do it. Is there a feeling amongst you guys that, look, there's just going to be a segment of the population that we will not reach with anything we put out, and whether it's facts and data or whether it is pulling on the heartstrings? Is there just a segment of U.S. society that's going to be closed off and basically call you, I don't know, anti-vaxxers or anti-science or whatnot?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think there will be. I think optimistically, we think that segment of the population is incredibly small.
Yeah,
So that's the hope.
Yes.
But I think, and again, that's part of the reason of if we, the plan for the longer docuseries is to release it next year, and the hope is that so much is coming in every day, and we'll kind of get a little more separation, hopefully, from some of this. And yeah, there is a challenge there, but I think if they're, depending on where they sit, there's always that chance that something will click and there will be sort of a shift in some of them, even the ones that are now. There's just always going to be those extreme people. And we can't do anything about that. I think a big piece of our audience though is probably more apolitical in a sense, and that's probably the largest piece of the population, and many of them might be just very slightly center left or slightly center right, but aren't really defining themselves in any particular way, but maybe like we describe them as a live and let live kind of crowd. Mm-hmm. There's a group of people out there, and that's I think an audience that we'd like to appeal to, and a lot of them, it just might be an issue of just not having a lot of the information. But so there, some of them may be wearing masks and doing a lot of the things, but not really, not doubling down on that stuff, but just kind of, and I think that's a crowd we'd like to reach.
We're also being very conscious in the way we present this. We really want to avoid it coming off as any kind of right-wing slanted approach. We believe that the core issues that often animate, at least ostensibly animate the left, are ones that they should be concerned about in regard to this project. That, an appreciation for the scientific method, an appreciation for free speech, an appreciation for minorities and people without means who have been severely hurt as a result of all of these policies. Those are things that people on the left should really be concerned about and paying attention to. So I think we really want to be conscious to present it in a way that it's accessible to people that have that paradigm, even though they may initially be skeptical, given that it is criticizing a narrative that they've largely swallowed.
Yeah, can you guys talk about, I guess, some of the challenges that you face, whether it's just logistics or anything involved with this project?
Well, raising money is always a difficult thing for any project. That's a straightforward part of it, because and the traditional avenues are very dominated by the traditional left-leaning media. We've been discussing how to get the word out, and we've been discussing various PR groups and whatnot. And they're like, "Well, you're going to have a hard time even advertising because just the words alone that should not be considered inflammatory in a free society with freedom of speech." They're saying, yeah, it'll get flagged and you won't be able to advertise properly. So your advertising may not even be open to you. So we're having those types of roadblocks in front of us, which is why we're kind of, in terms of the oral storytelling and the wonderful world of podcasting, we've been doing the rounds and discuss and getting the word out to the audiences and having tremendous response. We've already raised nearly $80,000 on effectively podcasting appearances alone. And wow. So that's really quite amazing. And it gives you a sense of how things are changing, of how if you're making non-traditional controversial films that we're making our own way. And that said, now that we've got some heat and some legs under us, it's so much, it's that good old adage of it's a lot easier to make money when you have money. So we have a lot of nonprofit groups, investor groups that we're talking to who are now very interested in us because we've had such good success, because obviously there's a high demand for a film like this. One thing I wanted to say earlier about the heartstring aspect and reaching out to the left. And, I've been trying to figure out what to call it, to sort of how you described it, sort of the deconstructive left, the burn it down left, or deconstructive progressivism. I feel that there's actually a lot of traditional liberals. I mean, I, for a time, used to navigating the LA Hollywood scene, I would describe myself as a liberal from the 90s, and that there's nowhere left to be like that. And that was my sort of entree into a more libertarian or liberty world and the freedom movement and whatnot. And but I think there's a lot of traditional liberals and constructive progressives who are interested in building bridges and trying to find links between their fellow humans, regardless of their political stripes. And I also just think that all of us, regardless of the political labels, I think there's a real attraction to authenticity. I think we were talking about having strong stories that tug at the heartstrings. Well, we want strong stories that tug at the heartstrings authentically. And I mean, where we are so inundated with so much emotional manipulation these days, I think there's a Simpsons, Brock, the newscaster, was like, murder, death, murder, death, and a puppy finds a home. Like, we're used to that kind of stuff, and then or like and some emotional thing, buy Coca-Cola. But this is something that we all lived through. And we know that this was a real experience. This was a moment of history that we've all experienced. And we feel that if we tell stories authentically, that the human mind, however subliminally or consciously, reacts to that. And I think it helps people find their way to understanding each other. And even just with, like, we felt so many people oh, my side's telling me that we have to lock down. We need to shame and shun anyone who disagrees with what's happening, who may question the masks, who may question the lockdowns. And yet somewhere they're insecure because they feel there's an inauthentic message that's at the source of it. And this sort of suspicion that that there was a lot of CYA going on with Fauci and his cronies. And I think that's what we want to build our stories around. We want to build that sort of relatable authenticity and level of trust. And that this is something that everyone can find wherever they're coming from, find a way to understanding each other, and that type of authenticity we feel will help this series rise above. And that being the case, we want to make it as high a quality as possible and raise funds to really bring in something that's, shall we say, Netflix worthy. So that's why we're going for, it's a 5-episode series. We're roughly $250,000 per episode, $1 million, $1.5 million, which sounds like a lot, but it's actually quite little in terms of the Hollywood amount of material, because we want to bring in as many professionals as possible to sort of really shine, have a nice, shiny, high production value, cinematic, proper film that gets at these stories, this authenticity, this process of awakening the inner dissident that we think is in everybody.
Excellent. That's a very good goal. Are there any bigger names that you guys can reveal that might be associated with this as far as star power?
We don't have anybody on board at this point. We are we've been contemplating Mike Rowe as a kind of on-screen narrator. That's something that we would love to have happen. We feel like he has spoken very eloquently about concerns about the policies, and he's a figure that's really loved across the political spectrum. So if not Mike Rowe, we'll find somebody else. But that's kind of an ideal for us, is having somebody of his stature to guide us through the journey.
And Alan, you said a while ago, Netflix worthy. I wanted to ask you, formatting, like, is that a possibility that something like this would be put out by not put out by, but accepted to be on the Netflix format? It seems like Amazon has a bigger, allowable scale for dissident type documentaries and whatnot. But what formats are you guys thinking for something like this?
Yeah, in terms of distribution models,
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's part of it. I mean, we want to shoot high. That's the worldwide sort of distribution models that Netflix and Amazon represent is what we're going for. In terms of facing the reality of what distribution models are willing to work with us because they feel there's a lot of censorship going on these days, as we all know. We feel that if we make something high quality enough and with the right type of neutrality and production level and hard-hitting sort of investigative journalistic aspects to it, we feel that we will crack through in some regard one of these platforms. We also understand that it's a constantly evolving spot. So we, as part of the budget, we've been growing our production plan and budgetary plan and marketing plan, that we want to hire a proper cutting edge PR person who can help us navigate that. If we find we're hitting any walls with the top levels, like, well, what are the most current ways to get something out in an independent fashion? So we're shooting as high as possible and ready to fight tooth and nail for making our own way, whatever it requires.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add to that too. I mean, it as Alan mentioned, it's really going to be a lot about the tone of the film too, and just that it's we don't want to come off in any way as condescending to those who were putting on 2 masks and accepting the lockdowns. They're not the enemy, so they're our audience. We welcome them, and we just would like, it just might be some lack of information. We want to present everything in a very exploratory way, and bring them along to explore these things as well. So I mean, that tone, we've been really trying to dial that in as we continue to develop this. But that's going to be very important as well.
Whose idea was this initially? What sparked the interest in making this docuseries?
Well, John can talk a little bit about that.
That's a John. All right, John, your turn.
All roads lead back to Tom Woods. He has had on a few times a gentleman who creates charts and puts them on Twitter. And he had him on probably about 2 months ago now, maybe even a little bit more. And they were talking about the data, and Tom said, "Gosh darn it, I wish somebody would make a high quality documentary about this stuff." And I thought, yeah, I would really love to see that. And then I looked in the mirror and I'm like, well, why shouldn't I make it? And so I got on the phone with these guys. It's not something I could do on my own, and said, I don't know how serious I am about this, but what do you think? And I think we all kind of hemmed and hawed and eventually said, yeah, it needs to be done. And we probably have the skills and resources to get it made. So that was kind of the beginning.
That is excellent. Thank you, Tom Woods.
Yeah.
How funny to be listening to that. And you're like, he's right. Yeah, someone does need to do this. Wait, I do this. Okay. Damn it. That's me. I want to tell you about your one-stop shop for all things CBD, and they've got a brand new website for you to check out, PalomaVerdeCBD.com. And it's the Paloma Verde store, of course, owned by a great couple, Carlos and Vanessa, out of San Antonio, Texas. Carlos is a very bright young man. I can tell you why. Once you go to the new website, palomaverdecbd.com, you'll realize that he's smart enough to feature the better looking of the two on the brand new website. And you'll see what I mean once you go there. They've got everything you need as far as the world of CBD goes. You can explore their products on the new website page. You can see obviously they've got the tinctures, but they've got mint tinctures, they've got soft gels, they've got CBD gummies, multiple flavors of those, the salve stick, the sleep bundle, which I'm going to have to check out. I've not had the sleep bundle yet, but that sounds enticing to me. The menthol sports cream, I can tell you, works amazingly. I've used that multiple times. And one of the biggest fans I personally know of Paloma Verde CBD products is my French bulldog named Lux. He's about 10 years old now, which in dog years makes him like 70 or something, right? He's old, and he gets around like a little old man with his back legs a little bit slower than they used to be, until we started putting the CBD pet products that they have at palomaverdecbd.com. We put it on his food every morning. They also have these dog treats that we give him, and it's amazing the job that the products have done for Lux, my French bulldog. Now he's trotting around like he's young again. He gets in and out of the doggy door with ease, which is a relief to me, I can tell you that. So, of course, I've got a promo code for you. It is BUCK, B-U-C-K. When you enter BUCK, the promo code at checkout, you get 25% off of all of your orders over $75, which is a bargain. That's over at palomaverdecbd.com, their new website. Promo code BUCK, get you 25% off all orders over $75. Let's get back to the show. So was the SoundMind Creative Group already a thing, or did that come about because of this idea?
Well, that came about because of this, because, John called me and Alan and was like, hey, maybe we should do this. And I think, there was some hesitation again because of the cancel culture stuff. So that kind of started the seeds of the SoundMind Creative Group. And we came up with that idea as we were trying to find a way to do this documentary. So yeah, it's all kind of connected through the whole thing. So
is it going to be, I mean, we want this to be big, and I feel that it will be. Will it be a tough challenge to remain anonymous as this thing grows? Say, for instance, if Joe Rogan wanted to have a representative on from your group to discuss this, obviously you can't pass, the biggest podcast in the world up. Or, for instance, Tucker Carlson. Is there going to be maybe a spokesperson that you guys hire to represent you, or how will that work?
Yeah, that's evolving a little bit. I mean, as SoundMind Creative Group, the whole group, if members choose to remain anonymous, they have that option. But they also, we are giving people the choice. If they're okay with being out there, they can be. And now, as far as us three, that could evolve during the course of this. It could become more difficult, and maybe if it does grow big enough, it might be like, well, we just need to balance out individually what's the trade-off. If we go public with it and we might lose some of our other livelihood, are we going to still be okay because it's big enough or whatever? So that may evolve. But a spokesperson, we've talked about the idea of a spokesperson, like John was talking about Mike Rowe. If, say, we are able to secure him down the road, and this might be more closer to the release or even after the release, maybe he'd we'd have him go do the rounds and talk about the film or something like that, or another spokesperson, or if one of us decides to out ourselves, that might be another path. But that's some things. I mean, when it started out, we're doing this guerrilla style, grassroots, and we had no idea, what kind of response we'd get. It's been extremely encouraging so far, and we're about to really ramp up our social media presence and all that as we continue to do more and more podcasts, and all that's going to depend on how much this can grow and how much exposure we can get, and certainly as far as raising the funds to really put this together the way we think it needs to be done.
As someone who's definitely way outside of any type of Hollywood bubble, is the homogenous thinking force field, is it can it be penetrated at all? Is there any optimism, let's say, that if one of you guys was outed, that you're involved in this, that some people, and maybe broadly within your working groups, would just go, he's just a little bit awkward and politically, or I don't agree with him, but that's fine that they're doing their thing? Or is it still, I heard one of you guys say Mauschwitz on a podcast. Is it still this like, no, you will be ousted?
Well, it's a subtle thing. I mean, it's Hollywood. One of the things to know, and like you never hear the word no. No one's the culture is, if you say no, then you might have passed on the next great thing. And so the worst you ever hear is, I liked it, I didn't love it. I liked it, I didn't love it is a hard no from a studio exec. And there's this subtlety to it, and the subtlety of networking and making things happen for yourself. And so you have to. It's always interesting as a freelancer, as someone who's project based. I mean, there's no job security in that world. So it really is who you know and how you work that network, and you can kind of gauge with when the phone seems to not ring as much. And it's a difficult thing. The sort of modern blacklisting is a difficult thing to quantify. So that's why, so therefore we all have to kind of live, unfortunately, kind of in fear of it. So the sort of this cancel culture thing is the new phenomena because of the new media. I mean, for instance, you've built up your own persona, your own brand and all these podcasts. And that is what a lot of people do these days. And we discussed it. It's like, well, we could go down that road, but it used to be that when you developed like any intellectual property, you were very quiet about it. You really wanted to put it together as quietly as possible to dissuade competition or have people steal the idea, who's involved. You would really try and get as far along as possible before you revealed it. So we're this is an experiment. We're trying to figure out how best it works. We felt by doing this, we could demonstrate to a lot of talent out there who may want to work with us anonymously that we're putting a premium on privacy. I mean, obviously, privacy's kind of gone by the wayside with the internet, and privacy used to be I think it still is a highly valued thing, and we feel that this is demonstrating that we're capable of that. And we also expect there'll be people who are always loud and proud for liberty and will want to be pushing this stuff hard, and we'll develop that as needed. And so right now we're having the experiment of speaking with you, utilizing pseudonyms in the SoundMind Creative Group, and inviting those who are interested to join us and help us evolve it and figure out what works best. Because the money is coming in, and we're thrilled about that, and that means there's a possibility of real growth here.
Did 2020, the events we're speaking about here, did that red pill any of y'all's coworkers? Did you start to see the scales removed from any eyes?
I'm trying to think. I'm sure that occurred to some degree. The other thing is, it's not always easy to see, if that has happened, it's possible, just acquaintances, for example, on Facebook and that kind of thing, that they may not be voicing that. They may have just gone silent, much like us in a way. And so it's hard to know that. But we've met different people, me and my family, we've met some people in the past few months, even that said, when the thing broke, they were much more concerned and all that. And as the thing unfolded over the course of a year, their thoughts on the whole thing shifted. So, I don't know if Alan and John have seen any other shifts.
I'd say, based on my Facebook feed, if anything, it's pushed people deeper into the paradigm. That I was stunned when it first started, and I started sharing some articles and ideas that were contrary to the mainstream narrative, how much vitriol I got from people because when it started, I thought, well, this is a scientific issue, and there are human rights issues involved, and we should be having that discussion. And I didn't think it was going to fall along political lines, and it was a bit shocking to me, the kind of backlash that I was getting from people that identify as left.
Yeah, I noticed that too. One of the things looking back that I find shocking is how quickly it happened in that regard. Now we've been through so much of it, and everyone's just basically it's politicized to the nth degree. But at first, like you, I didn't think it would fall along political lines. But even before the lockdowns took place as widespread, I started seeing it. A friend of mine, the Reverend Horton Heats, a musician, just put on Facebook, hey, just so you know, my tour is still ongoing. If a show cancels, it was not me doing it. It was a venue, just so you guys know. And within, I mean, it was filled with people that had claimed to be his fans saying what a murderer he was and how dare you keep touring when this is going on. And that was really before, like I said, the lockdowns were widespread. It just happened so quickly. And I remember thinking, what's going on with these people? Are they nuts? Like, they're
I think it's. I mean, the radicalization was very profound. It happened quickly, and I think it's because we really are seeing the effects of the 10 to 20 years of the internet in ways that we just have no idea what it's doing to the human psyche. And I think the amount of emotional manipulation and constant competition for our attention is primed everyone for this. I think if you don't use a muscle, that muscle goes away, and the critical thinking muscle and the analysis muscle, in terms of the way the mind works, has had generally atrophied. I mean, a vast portion of our population just rolled over and gave up their rights as if it was nothing.
Yes.
And those of us who are liberty oriented were just kind of stood aghast, like, my God, because in their minds they're saving grandma. And anyone who disagreed was killing their grandparents, and it gave them this unanalyzed, non-critical, emotional belief that what they were doing was the righteous, emotionally correct thing to do, and regardless of what anyone said, they could shout them down, they could shun them, they could shame them, and this old world shunning and shaming used to be how politics were controlled people, and it's a return of the old.
Yes.
And I think it's trying to kind of redevelop the emotional IQs of people to then give them the basis to have a critical thinking mind, which then leads to an analytical mind, which then leads to people who I think the belief system of people on this podcast of that liberty and freedom is where it's at. But I think it's a long road back to redeveloping that type of thought pattern. I think that's part of what we're doing here.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that. I think another layer that, it's funny, I think some of us have kind of forgotten, but a little bit, but I think the atmosphere of Trump played a role as well, significantly. And, just even him hinting at sort of some of the alternative narratives to some degree, and with the Trump derangement syndrome and the media, the way it was just so extreme. It was almost like whatever was the opposite of what Trump said is what's true, and we're going to triple down on that. And I think that definitely played a role in sort of accelerating all of it, regardless of whatever opinions people have of Trump. There was certainly, the left was out to get him, and the left media in particular. And so that certainly played a role. And a lot of people too, people left leaning, had this hate in them for Trump that I think was tapped into, and that hate, and then you combine it with the fear, and then with the media and everything else, that definitely accelerated the politicization as well.
Yes, one of the things that was pretty disappointing to me to see throughout all of this is we saw videos of cops arresting someone without a mask or raiding a business that shouldn't have been open, but largely we didn't even need the government to enforce a lot of this tyranny types of regulation and rules. It really, sadly, a lot of the population kind of voluntarily were their own arms of the government, and they were willing to try to shame people for opening their business throughout, and when they felt they should not have done that, or yelling at someone who didn't have a mask on outside. Did you guys see that as well?
The one that really caught my eye was to your point about things that just sort of happen spontaneously, where in the early days, where one of the few things you go do is go for a hike. And I mean, I didn't wear a mask. I mean, I as rarely as possible, other than maybe to comply with some of the company, businesses that are trying to remain open. And I'm like, all right, when I go inside the store for their sake, I would do it. But when I was outside, never. It was my choice. But I thought it was interesting. I'd be on these trails, wide trails, and people would come the other way, and they wouldn't just have their mask. They would stop and they would turn their back and they'd step off to the side as if, here we are outside. Like there was no indication that in any way would help the situation, but it was this very distinct. They wanted to turn their backs to you as you passed by, and it was an interesting psychological, spontaneous growth in the shaming and shunning culture, and it was like, wow, this is really, people are really all in on this, at least in terms of their emotional belief system.
Yes, it revealed this sick kind of authoritarian strain that's unfortunately in a lot of people, with just the phrasing alone. Take the damn vax, wear the damn mask, stay the fuck home. All of these harsh sounding things, and
tyrannical.
Tyrannical. And I'm looking at some of the people I know and like, what's the matter with you? What got into you to say things like this and to have this position of holier than thou? And I don't know, maybe this it was lying dormant in them or something, and 2020 just certainly revealed it. It's nuts.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a group of people, and I was thinking about it. It's there ought to be a law people,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's like these are these people, and I think with the combination with the media stoking the fear and also just amplifying sort of the mainstream narrative in a way that, and then with it being sort of a virtuous thing, and then them going as far as saying, well, there ought to be a law on this. There should be mass mandate in it, and being very vocal about it and being open because they have the support of the mainstream, both the media and the politicians, and that, it was interesting to see in the United States how I mean, there were many that argued that Trump should have done more from the federal level. So unfortunately, he didn't do that much. Right. But we've seen, which was actually good, because we saw an interesting experiment unfold between different states doing different things. And of course, we've got an accumulation of data because of that. That's going to be interesting to dig into, of course, with the documentary. But yeah, that there ought to be a law types. I mean, then those go back, and we all know them. And it's like, of course, we're of the opposite opinion on that. There ought to not be a law for that, right. But
And I'll jump in too, just to say, I feel it's an inherent reveal of their own insecurities, because they've been told what to believe. They haven't arrived at their belief systems on their own. And so there's an insecurity at the base of their belief system. And so rather than confront that and think about it, they project that insecurity as hatred or as judgment onto others, the otherizing of anyone who thinks differently. I believe it's a subtle reveal of their own insecurity. I mean, that anger is really an anger at themselves. There's a psychological thing there, but it's so widespread, it's difficult. I mean, that's what we want to have as an underlying theme, to try and to disentangle that, because these are the type of people that we want to connect with them. We want to reach out to them. We want to say, hey, maybe we were all wrong in some capacity. If we all can admit to it, maybe we can find what would have worked best and figure that out for the next time, and try and reopen our ability to connect with each other.
And not that some of the people the types we're referring to care about inconsistency or hypocrisy, but I did find it telling throughout the summer of riots and defund the police. Some of my friends that were in that camp were for enforcement of lockdowns, and I at some point had someone actually say police drones should fly over the streets, and if people are out, they should be arrested. While at the same time saying defund the police, and the police are the worst people in the world. It was, and then of course, like you said, Trump, who was literally Hitler, the authoritarian, should be enforcing everything from the top and shut the entire country down. Fascinating study of society for sure.
Yeah, I thought that as far as Trump, I thought it was pretty incredible that he was authoritarian, fascist, dictator. And yet I'm like, wow, if he's a dictator, he's one of the worst dictators that's ever existed, because he's resisted a lot of top down. I mean, he could have done a lot more, and he didn't. He didn't do a whole lot, which was at least somewhat right, from our viewpoint. But yeah, that was fascinating.
And because he didn't do a whole lot from top down, really is what's blessed us with with the charts and data that we do have, so we can at least draw from that and use that information. Now we've got Florida, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Like I said, Florida, California, and it's fascinating to let the experiments take place among the states as should be the case, and it's taught us a lot. And I think it actually makes some red pills available to those who are willing to take them. Before we get out of here, obviously this is big. What's the most important thing my listeners can do to help you guys?
Well, certainly we need your financial support. We see this project not just as an interesting way to spend our time, but we see it as a lifeline. What our perspective is, without high quality media that challenges the mainstream narrative, our civilization is heading in a really bad direction. And not to overglorify what we're doing. Hopefully, there will be others that are doing similar things. But it's critical that this kind of media gets out there. So it's in that spirit that we come to this community and say, please join with us in creating this documentary. Your financial support is great. We're also trying to build a community. Part of the perks of donations is access to a community. At the $500 level, people are able to actually become advisors to us. We'll have a private community where people will be able to see parts of the film as it's being made and offer us feedback and share information. As we mentioned earlier, your stories are really important. So just please reach out to us in whatever way you can and help us get this made.
And how can they go about doing that?
So the website for donation is fundraiser.com. That's fundrazr.com/follow-the-science. And we have a 5-minute trailer there that gives a sense of the scope of the project and some information about what we're trying to achieve and who we are. So that's the best place. We also mentioned earlier the soundmindcreativegroup.com, where people can share stories with us.
Yeah, and they can also, there's other options to donate, crypto and other ways to contribute there. And those are also linked at the fundraiser page. But
will you guys have a Twitter presence at all?
Yes, we just set up a Twitter. We have at SoundMindCG, and we're just getting that rolling. And as we dive into sort of more guerrilla social media tactics to spread the word, so you can find us there, and we'll be starting to get active in that world, which is going to be fun. But
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. Any closing statements from any of you guys? Please feel free.
Well, one thing occurred to me. I don't think we mentioned we're already in close relationship with Nick Hudson of Panda, who's been very helpful. We were very impressed with his criticisms of what's going on in a real time way, and we've been talking to him a great extent. I think John can probably talk a little more about him, but I think I wanted to make sure. We've been having a lot of great traction with good, strong minds who have been questioning it all along, who want to be part of this film. So as we build on our talent base in terms of like a Mike Rowe type character who will help be a voice and sort of a narrative voice, the talking heads, the experts, we're really getting great response from credentialed folks who want to help us be more critical of what happened.
John?
I would just say one thing that I didn't mention in terms of ways people can help us is spreading the word about this, getting it out on social media. That's probably as valuable as donating. So I would just really encourage people to share as much as they are comfortable doing about this project.
Excellent. You guys listening, please share this stuff. I'm going to link to every imaginable link that these guys need in the show notes page for this episode. I'll have the fundraiser information there, the soundmindcreativegroup.com. start tweeting these guys on Twitter at SoundMindCG, because as we know, Twitter is quite an easy way to get word out. And please spread the word, you guys. I know everyone listening to this understands the importance of a project like this. And, I'm not one to pontificate and go on emotionally about stuff like this on this show, but this truly is important. And it's big. As soon as they reached out to me to come on this show, it was an absolutely, and I get offers or requests by people all the time that sometimes go unanswered. And I wrote these guys back immediately because this is of huge importance. So I wanted to get that in here. And in closing, Alan, Matt, John, it must feel weird to get called by a name that's not yours, but I'm so glad that you guys were here on Counterflow, the Sound Mind Creative Group. Thank you guys so much for doing this, and thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Buck.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you,
sir.
Buck.
All right, you guys know me. I don't always give an emotional pitch at the end of an interview like that, but this means a lot. And I think it means a lot to you guys too. So please contribute where you can. Give these guys follows on Twitter, all of that good stuff. What a project. This is going to be great. And just to get it down on the historical record, so years from now, we can look back and say, at least we had it right. Just like we can with the war in Iraq and the WMD lies, we can look back and say, we were right on this issue. And I hope these guys can convince a lot of people. Really, so one reason would be so stuff like that does not happen again. So for the housekeeping of this show, I almost said the old website, didn't I? Counterflowpodcast.com has the new t-shirts. It's got the new Counterflow podcast t-shirts, and maybe like I just hinted at, it's got the old Death to Tyrants t-shirts as well on clearance. They are $10. And I've noticed since I lowered the price, those old t-shirts have become quite popular. So I am glad to get them out there to you guys and get them out of the box in my closet. So you can find them, like I said, on counterflowpodcast.com. The Telegram group is happening. Telegram app. You can find the room there, Counterflow with Buck Johnson. We've got the YouTube channel going. Like I said early on, if you watch this YouTube video, sorry, all you see is me because we couldn't show their faces. I don't want them getting in trouble with their peers yet. Once this gets big and it blows up, then maybe they can show their faces. We shall see. Let me see. I think that's about all I got this week. I'll just say, follow me at Buck Rebel. Reach out to me on there and tell me what you thought about this episode, or reach out in the Telegram group and let me know what you thought. And until... Oh, wait a second. Justin, my guy, my video guy, I've advertised the YouTube page already. We now have an Odyssey page too. That's still new to me, but my guy Justin is putting all the videos up on Odyssey as well. Go check it out. Odyssey. It's good. They can't ban us on Odyssey, right? In fact, unfortunately dangerous as this episode was, maybe it won't be on YouTube for long, but it certainly will stay up on Odyssey. So share that page as well. And until next week, you guys have a great one.
You get split in fucking half. The icon, the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been the Counterflow Podcast, a part of the Renegade Media Network.